So I'm going to do something a little bit crazy today that I've never done before. I'm doing a hybrid presentation because I have a co-presenter. She'll chime in at the moment. So the camera here is so that she can see you in Zoom. For the moment, it's working. If it doesn't work, I'll take over and we'll do it the old-fashioned way. So you can scan this QR code on the screen, and you should be able to react in real time to what I'm saying. And that way I know you're not sleeping, even though we do have a small crowd. So if you're sleeping, I'll see you. So that should help. So we're here to talk about accessibility. So I have a tendency to move around. So if I get too far from the microphone, you can all tell me to come back. I work on a project, the Accessibility Theme Builder, which is a FINOS project. And we're here to discuss that today. And this talk is really about design, development, AI. We got to have some AI in there, right? And specific around accessibility. Oh my. So a little theme of Wizard of Oz. Looking around the group, I think everybody probably knows what Wizard of Oz is, but I did have some other colleagues who told me they didn't know what that was. So that's when you know you're getting old. Moving on. So I'm a maintainer of Accessibility Theme Builder along with Lisa Noble, who's on the line. Lisa, do you just want to say hi?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon to you. I'm calling in from San Francisco, and it's a delight to be here.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you so much. We can hear you, just to let you know. They can't see you, but they can hear you. So that's the important
Perfect.
thing. Okay.
That's the best.
So come check us out. Add us on LinkedIn, and don't just follow. Like, go all the way to connect, because I'd love to talk to any of you about these subjects later in more detail. I'm really passionate about it. Yeah, I work at Nearform. We do professional services where honestly, we just do amazing things around Node.js, JavaScript, full stack, finance, so many interesting things. I'm a FINOS ambassador, so I get to be here at these FINOS events, which I love, I'm really proud of, and also teach at the local university where I live in France. I'm American originally, so sorry to disappoint that I don't have a French accent. Lisa, I'll just introduce her. She's the Director, Distinguished UX Engineer and Designer, Innovation Accelerator Leader. Oh, it's a long title, Lisa. You got to shorten that for me. At Discover. So Lisa's doing some amazing work and has really been the champion of this project. So moving along, you can look us both up here, take a photo for later. I'll put these QR codes up at the end also. Sorry, I'm just making sure that, I'm going to share my screen for Lisa, folks. Sorry, I should have been a little bit more prepared, but I just jumped right in here. I'm going to share just the screen so she knows what slide we're on, because I think that'll be important as we move forward. So yeah, hopefully, Lisa, you can see the...
I can. Thank you.
Awesome. That's probably better. So we're here to talk about a journey that I'm going to take everybody on right now. So many little details I'm trying to work out here at the same time. Never done a talk quite like this. So the journey, like I said, we're going to talk about the Wizard of Oz. And we'll go into details on all of these. Do scan that QR code at any time you want to give me some feedback. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Scarecrow, right? And what's the Scarecrow missing? Well, he's missing a brain. So we're here to help you gain some knowledge and some insight around accessibility that you can bring back with you to your enterprise, to your company, to your organization, to some tools and some things to think about, questions to ask, and that maybe we could discuss further later. So what does digital accessibility mean? Let's start with the basics, right? Now this is going to be a really busy slide. You don't have to read it all, but basically we're talking about digital accessibility according to the World Wide Web Consortium, and we're talking about all the tech that goes into the web, but it could be, they, in their quote, developed so that people with disabilities can use them. Now, there's lots of different types of official disabilities, right? So auditory, cognitive, I don't need to read those, you can see them on the screen for yourself. But there's other things too that if we start building accessibility can help us with. So I'm thinking about benefiting people without disabilities, right? So as people use telephones, like they might interact with your website in a different way that take advantage of assistive technologies, right? Same with your smart TV and some other devices. So accessibility is not just about disabilities, right? What about as we age and we get older, right? There's tons of other ways that we might want to interact with an application in a different way. maybe our eyesight changes or our mobility changes. So I think the important thing is we're not just talking about disabilities, right? We're talking about different needs that folks have when they interact with the web. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And there's also temporary disabilities, right? If you break a leg or something, that's supposed to bring good luck, right? So lots of different ways that people interact with accessibility. So I'm just going to keep track of time because I started a little bit late, but when I'm about 10 minutes in to where I should be, so I want to make sure I leave time for Lisa to talk in the end. So let's go another 5 or 10 minutes here. People with situational limitations. So, right, it's not just disabilities. Like people can be more sensitive to light and the way that they see things. And people with slow internet connection, like they might not load up all those fancy pants animations that you put on your website or those really high resolution images. So there's lots of ways to think about accessibility. And the point I wanted to make with this slide is not just about disabilities, right? It's about needs that people have when they interact with the websites. So, and those were all quotes that I took from the World Wide Web Consortium. So it's also smart to invest in accessibility, right? We're here at FINOS talking about Fintech, right? So let's talk about numbers now. So Forrester in 2022, accessibility and user experience improvements bring back $100 for every dollar invested. So that's why I'm going to try to convince you today that you should be investing in that from the beginning, right? Like the return on investment is huge versus trying to like mousetrap something in at the end. Yeah, all kinds of numbers here, right? $1 trillion. People with disabilities collectively amount for 1 trillion annual disposable income worldwide. So these are things that people don't think about when we're talking about needs and accessibility, that we're actually creating revenue for your organizations, right? And 8 trillion when you consider that research shows friends and family, people with disabilities often prefer to do business with brands that care about accessibility. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, right? It's not just expanding our user base. It's not just meeting laws and regulations. It's the right thing to do, right? So there's a moral lesson to accessibility too. So who owns accessibility in your organization? That's the next question I have for you. Designers, yeah, they should own it. Developers, oh yeah, they should be owning it. Product owners, DevOps, testers, project managers, architects, executives. It's everybody. That's what I'm here to convince you about. That's not just one person, and everyone thinks someone else owns it, right? I'm a dev by trade. I'm going to go implement those designs. Well, I'm going to do them exactly as the designer put them because it's accessible, right? I assume. So this is a challenge that people have, right? And designers do the same thing. They're like, oh, well, the devs, like, they're going to add all those fancy pants tags on that web interface to make it accessible, right? Like, I don't need to worry about that stuff. No, the point to this is it's everybody's responsibility, not just somebody else. It's you, and it's everybody in the organization. And POs, project owners, they think that it's handled, right? Their teams just do it. Like they said in the meeting, like they're building accessibility in from the beginning. No, everybody has to own it. So probably going a little slow, but another 5 minutes here before I hand it over to Lisa. So let's talk about the Tin Man who needs some heart, right? So you can empathize with people with disabilities, designers and developers who are trying to build accessible digital experiences. So why is accessibility important? Well, I already said. I already gave away the cat out of the bag, but you want to grow your user base, right? There's this fallacy that if I build an interface, an application that's accessible, like it's going to be less cool, right? Like that's what I've heard working in my experience. Like, oh, like let's just worry about that later. Like the designer's got this really cool idea in their head and it's just going to be super sweet. Like forget about it. No, like you're limiting your user base, right? And I just showed you the statistics a minute ago and I'll show you some more later, right? You want to grow that user base. So if you're thinking, oh, accessibility later, like you just like reduced your user base a bunch. And now, 2024, there's tons of laws and regulations around this stuff, right? Like your employer needs to have equal opportunities for all their employees. So that means even the internal tools should be accessible, right? That tool that you use, the internal tool to, I don't know, do the trainings at work if you're not using a training platform, but you probably are because you work at a bank. But there's other internal tools that you use, right? So you need to meet those laws and regulations. And then I put this line in here because it's like I said, it's not just internal, it's not just external or just internal, right? We want to have accessibility, both our inward facing tools and our exterior tools. So that's where the design system piece comes in. And finally, like I said before, it's just the right thing to do, right? Like, so I showed you why financially, legally, where it should be applied, but also morally, right? I think that's the lesson to this slide. So I'm going to hand it over shortly. I'm going to probably speed up a little bit, but again, why is accessibility important? 1.3 billion people, 1 in 6 worldwide experience significant disabilities. That was some data done, research done in 2022. I already told you about like the amount of money, right? So estimated to control over $13 trillion. So there's just so much revenue and opportunity that comes along with accessibility. And if we talk about the United States, 75% of Americans with disabilities report using the internet on a daily basis. Surprise, surprise, right? It's 2024. Like everything happens on the internet now. You can't even like have a doctor's appointment without some sort of internet access. So if we talk about what is accessibility and why it's important, like the stats are crazy, right? So WCAG, this is the guidelines around building accessibility that you can measure if you meet accessibility. Well, out of like 1 million websites, like the top 1 million websites, 95.9% of them have failures for the WCAG 2 guidelines. So this is crazy, right? Like your library that you thought was accessible, well, it probably isn't. Okay, so I'm gonna go really fast so that Lise actually has a little bit of time at the end of this. So I got more graphs on here. The important thing about this graph is that 80% of those failures are due to low contrast text, right? So you're probably thinking, oh no, we put a dark text on a white background. Well, the designers think about dark mode, because you also do dark mode, right? So what about those grays and what about those visited links, right? If you just let the browser do it, how do they look in dark mode? So a lot of times we don't think about both sides of this. So building that in from the beginning is gonna be really important. So pop quiz, the fastest pop quiz in the history of time. Well, I feel like I have the right to go 5 minutes over, because I started 5 minutes late. So please, we'll get there quickly. So I'm gonna build something for iOS. I'm going to follow the Apple developer guidelines for interfaces. I'm accessible, right? You're not. You're going to have WCAG failures. I use Material UI. I'm accessible, right? You're not. So, sorry, I'm going really fast. Misconceptions. JavaScript libraries have you covered. Platforms have you covered, right? All these things. You're using a Figma plugin to check your accessibility, like Stark. Well, that's not going to meet all the WCAG guidelines. And you're testing your components in Storybook and Chromatic, so they have accessibility tests too, right? But the important thing here is that you're testing those components in isolation, not in the actual interface with the background colors and the other modes that your entire website might support. So yeah, lots of other reasons why it doesn't work. So let's talk about the lion. So Lise, I'm only 2 minutes over. We want to help you find courage, the courage to ask if there's a better way. So Lise, you can just say next slide, please, and I'll advance them. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Awesome. Well, thank you all. So yeah, we all know that the lion needed courage, and what we want to ask you guys today is we want to give you guys the courage or encourage you to have the courage to ask, is there a better way? And what if, like, ask the question, what if? What if we all stopped working in isolation to create these design systems that are increasingly more complex? What if we work together in open source with designers and developers and testers and accessibility experts working together to build accessibility into the core of our design systems? And what if we stop trying to chase the minimum requirements that are set by WCAG, but we reimagined what accessibility meant in order to provide people who have accessibility needs the ability to customize the experience that allows them to consume products and content and reach the tools that they need more successfully. So that is my question for you. And knowing that that's the question, I want to introduce you guys, next slide, to Theme Builder. And Theme Builder is an open source project that takes your brand design styles and guidelines and applies WCAG to create dynamic components that adapt automatically to dark mode, light mode, whether you're WCAG AA or AAA. It adapts the components and the styles to background colors. Not only that, but it gives the end user the capability of adjusting the interface even further. If I'm dyslexic, I can turn on dyslexic mode. It's interesting that there's so many digital things that we can do for people who have cognitive disabilities to improve the experience. You increase the line height, you can change the font. There are dyslexic fonts out there. If someone has ADHD, you increase the white space, you increase the contrast. There are certain colors that you can emphasize over others. There's small things that we can do to really improve that experience. We can also introduce motion sensitivity, which removes motion from websites that can be quite dizzying, even for cause problems for people who have cognitive disabilities. We also have 8 types of color blindness mode. Now, what we're doing in those colorblind modes is just adapting essential colors and informational graphics so that they're readable for people with color blindness. We're not changing your brand colors. They've recognized them in through their eyes their entire life, so we're not changing that. But there's so much more that we can do. So next slide. All right, so how do we do this? So what we did with Theme Builder was we created an interface where we collect your styles, right? Your brand styles. We collect your colors, the core of your design system. What is your grid system? What are your fonts? We gather all that information, and then what we do is we take an out of the box Figma file that we've created. It's an extensive design system, and we paired it to a MUI React design system. And then what we do is we apply the JSON and the CSS that comes out of Theme Builder to create your own branded Figma file that maps exactly to a MUI React design system. So now you have a design system that matches for your designers as well as for your developers that actually responds and is dynamic to different needs. So you don't need a design system for your Android phone and your Apple phone and your desktop application. You don't need a separate design system for your internal applications and your external. You simply turn on and off different modes and switches, and we do all the logic in the background for you. So why don't we go to the next slide? All right, so how did we do this? Well, we started to look at atomic design systems. If we go to the next slide, you can see that atomic design systems it's not something new. You may have heard of this before. It's a concept created by Brad Frost, who created an analogy from chemistry to design systems. And you start with the smallest piece of a design system, which we call in this atomic design system an atom. So that's things like colors, it's your fonts, it's your icons, it's your grid systems. And then you put those together to create molecules. Now, example of a molecule would be a button, right? A button uses your color, your font, a bevel, a target area, and then you start putting those molecules together to create components. You tie those components together to create templates, and the templates together to create experiences. Now, this is an incredibly logical and incredible way to create a design system, but the problem is there's nothing in here to stop you from going awry and creating inaccessible experiences. So next slide. So what did we do? We went subatomic. So we took it a step farther or backwards. We introduced the ideas of protons, neutrons, and electrons. For every color that comes into your design system, we create 10 shades of that color, but we also map it to an on color, which is a color that you can put on top of that meets the WCAG requirements for accessibility and contrast. So now when you start tethering together your atoms to create molecules, we will also use that logic to make sure that they get tethered together in the right way. The one thing that I will note that we do is, so for every component that you create, we'll do it in your branded or your selected branded color for your button. We also create a white button and a black button, because tell you what, that orange button isn't gonna look good on all colored backgrounds, and it won't be accessible on all color backgrounds. So what we automatically do is we update things like colors, the color of your buttons or your color components to maintain accessibility both in light and dark mode. So as you start tethering these things together to create components and templates and experiences, everything stays accessible, and no one needs to think about it. Your designer doesn't need to be an accessibility expert. Your developer doesn't need to be. But best of all, when you turn it to dark mode, we make sure that it all maintains the WCAG compliance for accessibility contrast. And that is extremely complicated to do, but we have figured out that that's something that we can do. We can also tether between WCAG AA, AAA. We change the components based on the background. So we also change the components based on the platform. So if you're going from Android to Apple, the target area changes. So there's a lot of magic happening there. All right, if we go to the next slide. All right, so here's a little bit of the magic behind the curtain. We all know in the Wizard of Oz there was someone behind the curtain, and this is a little bit of the magic. All of these different elements here in the middle, whether it's your WCAG level, the theme, we allow you to create themes. You could have a theme for your HR department and a theme for your engineering department. So the themes, the mode, whether it's light or dark mode, the component elevation level, now that's one that's often overlooked. If you're using dark mode, in light mode, elevation is shown with increasing drop shadows. In dark mode, it's showed with increasing lightness of the background. So you may have a button that is compliant at elevation 0, but at elevation 5, it's not, and the text is no longer legible. So we're working on calculations to make sure we keep everything accessible. If you change the background color, if you change the cognitive mode, which is something we've introduced, so let's say it's dyslexia or ADHD, we adjust things like font sizes and target sizes and line spacing and text character spacing. And then again, if you change the platform. So if you change the platform, that changes fonts and spacing and all of that. So you can see here all the logic lines that are coming in order to keep that experience accessible. So we're doing that all for you. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. And this is just a very simplified example. I would love to have given you guys a live demo today, but seeing that we only had a half an hour, we don't. But here's just an example of components and some styles on white, on dark, and some navy, and then on a bluish purple color. And you'll see that like the text colors have changed, the button color has changed, the hot links went from being not underlined to being underlined. So we're really thinking about all the things that need to happen in order to keep things accessible. All right, so go on to the next page. All right, so here's just sort of a breakdown of all the switches that sort of can be made to your interface. You can go from AA to AAA. It can be light or dark. You can have, we can render it in Figma, in your Figma file at 15 different device sizes, so you can see what it looks like. We render for different platforms, of course, as I mentioned. You can introduce those colorblind modes, as well as the cognitive modes and the motion sensitivity modes. And then you can turn on and off different brand themes. Now, just these, like turning on and off all these, you have 3,888 different combinations of a user interface, and all of them maintain accessibility. All right, go on to the next page. Thanks, Cody. All right, so I want to talk about the controls. So the designer in Figma, as I mentioned, doesn't really need to think about it. What you do is you change your mode in the panel on the right. So you just bring components onto the design board, you select, what color background it's going to be, and then as you change different settings, modes, and variables in your interface, the components and the styles update automatically. So a designer can render a whole user interface and then make a switch to say, I want to see what it looks like in dark mode, or I want to see what it looks like in AAA, or I want to see what it's going to look like on Android. They don't have to re-render those experiences. Now for developers, it's the same thing. We're using the same logic. It's the same code. It's all powered by JSON. So what they do is they don't have to rewrite CSS or change anything. They change their data mode from dark to light. They change their data elevation from 0 to 5. They change their data background color to pink to blue, and we take care of the rest. And then finally, for the end user, a lot of the magic is happening automatically for them based on the platform that they're on, the device that they're on. But additionally, they can take control of the interface with settings by saying, I'd like it to be in dyslexic mode, or I would like it to be in colorblind mode for someone who is color red blind or color blue blind, or I want to turn on motion sensitivity because I get a little dizzy from all the animations. So with all of this, we can create a really much better experience, not only for the end user, but for the designer and the developer along the way. All right, for the next page.
Lise, I'll just give a shout out that we're technically about out of time, but I think we can go about 5 more minutes and just give you a shout out.
Sorry, guys.
Yep, no worries.
All right, so finally, Dorothy. So we wanted to show you guys the roadmap. So if you go on to the next page, you can see that this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk very briefly about where we came from in 2023. We built this thing. It was Discover's first ever open source project. We built the logic engine to generate the CSS and the JSON. We dynamically updated the components, and we maintained accessibility. And this was in tools for both designers and developers. And then we handed this project off to FINOS. So the reason that we did that is because Discover couldn't wasn't set up to allow people to contribute back to our open source. They could clone it, but now Figma, FINOS is running it as a true open source project. So we're super grateful for FINOS for doing that. All right, we'll move on real quick because I want to give you guys a glimpse of sort of what's coming. So in V1, it was sort of one and done, and we started with just, the most simple thing that we could do. You built a theme and you walked through a very linear step and it created it for you and exported that code. Well, in V2, you're going to be able to go back, of course, and edit and add to your theme that you build. You can add additional themes. You can remove colors, update colors. We're giving you a lot more flexibility. Additionally, what we did is sorry, it's so small on my screen, so I'm going to swap to my own view here. So the other thing that we did was we were generating both CSS and JSON. Moving forward, we're going to just export JSON. That seems maybe counterintuitive, but we want one source of truth. And the reason we're doing that is we're going to use style dictionary to then transform the logic that comes from the JSON into CSS, but which can also be used to generate Xcode and export into Android and other formats. So it actually gives us a lot more flexibility. Also, in V1, we're manually exporting the code. Next, we will be exporting the code directly to GitHub, which then can interact and create a tool chain with your other tools that automatically render or consume the exported code. We can use things like GitHub Actions to automate the generation of the CSS once a pull request is made to update your interfaces. Also in V1, we had no AI. In V2, we're going to allow you to export your designs and components with Anima, which is a plugin for Figma, which will automatically consume our tokens and maintain the dynamic and accessible nature of the components that come out of it. And then on the next line, we talk about, components. Right now, if you make a new component, you've got to do that in our open source project. We're imagining for V2 that you can just take the code that comes out of that AI Anima plugin and paste it into Theme Builder to add a component. So you can really manage the growth of those components very organically in the tool. In the next page, we're also enhancing our controls for color generation. So in V1, it was just AA. It's now AA and AAA. You can now customize your light and dark text colors. For us, it was out of the box, just pure white, and black was 121212. We're allowing you to update that. You can generate colors with, we're no longer using a fixed chroma in studying color generation and curves or shade creations. You should really be interested in a curve of your chroma into the way you create your color scales. So we've done that. It looks really beautiful. You can adjust your chroma levels too, which means you can adjust how saturated your colors are coming out of it. You can also adjust, the hue of colors on either side. Just slightly. If you want to go from pink to a little bit more purple in your shades, you can do that. So it's really just about more control. We're giving the end user more control. I'm going to fly through these slides really quick. But the point of Theme Builder is not to replace your design or development tools. It's to work alongside them in order to superpower your design and development tools. Figma is not going away. PenPot or whichever tool you use for design is a critical tool that we don't want to replace. Nor do we want to replace your development tool. It really just, Theme Builder helps supercharge and bring that dynamic capability to your design system. So if we look at the roadmap ahead, and so I'm on slide 79. So, right now we are looking at creating this tool chain, as I imagine, this design ops tool chain, where everything is connected through Git repo. So you connect Theme Builder to it, you connect, your storybook to it, you connect your Figma file. So if you push a change of your JSON from any one of those resources, a style guide will read it and render it and push it out to all of those. On the next slide, as I mentioned, we're looking at introducing that AI logic. And thirdly, on the next slide, we're trying to add an accessibility audit to that process. So when JSON tokens get updated, if they come from outside of Theme Builder, so if a developer makes a change in Storybook.
Lise, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's a technical difficulty. They can't see the slides anymore, but they can hear you, okay?
Oh, okay.
But do continue. I'll try to fix that in the meantime.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so it's still, hopefully this makes sense. So when there is a change or a pull request made in your GitHub repo, what we want to do is trigger an audit check with Theme Builder that will see if any of the changes made require a change to your design system in order to maintain accessibility. And finally, what we want to do is extend the logic so that you can use various tools in JavaScript libraries. Right now, it's limited to MUI and React as the design language or the library, and we're connected through Figma using design tokens to as a design system. But we're trying to open that scope so that you can use whatever design source you want. So whether that's PenPot or Sketch or whatever is coming along next, because the world changes rapidly, you can do that. But also we're trying to export the code so it can be exported to Xcode, Node, Angular, whatever language you need. And that's it for me, so I know we're at the end of time.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we're a little bit over, and the slides disappeared, so it's going to be one of those. Oh, they're back just in time for your grand finale. So the grand finale is this. It's the call to action, everybody. We have a booth downstairs. Nobody else could be here, so I'm there. Come talk to me. Come get involved. Here's the QR code on top of the QR code, but you can see this is the URL. You can take a photo of that and come get involved in the project. It's a FINOS project. It's open source. We're looking for people to come and get involved, all different skill levels, all different backgrounds, right? You don't just have to be a coder. You can be a designer or just somebody interested in open source. There's roles for everybody. We'd love to see you there. Come get involved. Come talk with me. I have a booth way down. If you go into where all the booths are, in the left, in the farthest corner where they put the bad kids, that's where I am. I don't know why. Must be a sign, but I'm there. Come talk to me, ask me any questions. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I know I went a good 5 minutes over. That's the end of the presentation. Do meet up with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with all of you, and have a great rest of your conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Lisa, for doing this remotely.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was fun.